So you've seen the Venom 2 end credit scene, and I think there are only 2 words that could sum it up.
Oh, shit!
Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing editor here at Cinema Blend and your resident Spider-Man fanatic, and we're going to be talking about the end credit scene that arrives at the end of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. So, it goes without saying, get out of this video if you haven't seen the movie yet, or if you don't mind spoilers, because we're going to tell you everything that happens in that end credit scene, and it is a game changer, not just for Sony, but for Marvel and for all of the characters that you love. This is your last chance. Get out now if you don't want to know what happens.
Who do we leave behind? And how do we leave them? Waiting in the darkness.
Okay, I'm assuming that most of you have seen the scene, but I do want to go over just some of the details about what happened in the scene in case you're watching this because you don't care about spoilers. So we have Eddie and Venom in a dingy sort of hotel room with a Mexican soap opera playing on the television screen. The way that it's worded and the way that it's structured is very deliberate because it keeps it very mysterious. Venom says to Eddie, I'm essentially going to introduce you to some of the powers that the symbiotes have. We have been around for 80 million light years. He calls it 80 million light years of hive knowledge, essentially. And if I shared all of it with you, Eddie, I would break your tiny brain. But I'm going to show you a smidge of what we could possibly do.
Do you know how lucky you are that I chose you?
And Eddie's like, okay, fine, bring it on. So in a way, I thought, oh, okay, here's the symbiote. He's going to use some type of power that is totally foreign to us, and you can get away with this because he's an alien, and you can kind of dismiss it as just like, hey, these extraterrestrials have wild powers. But right as Venom is going to start showing Eddie some of the powers, something else happens in the room. It kind of transforms the room from an older, dingy-looking hotel room into a way more modern, sort of nicer hotel room, and the content specifically, this is what's important, the content on the television where they were watching turns into the Peter Parker reveal scene from the end of Spider-Man Far From Home. So we see J. Jonah Jameson, and he's talking about Peter Parker as Spider-Man. We see some original footage of Tom Holland as Spider-Man. It's very specifically Tom Holland. It is not Andrew Garfield, as some people have speculated. So the assumption is that whatever that transformation was that happened brought Eddie, Brock, and Venom from the Spider-Man universe into the MCU. I don't know where the hotel room is where they're sitting, but they're very clearly in a place in the MCU where they'd be able to watch the Far From Home revelation on a television set and process the fact that they're now in a world where Tom Holland is Spider-Man.
Whoa, where you going? That is a red one! You need to come out right now.
So the transition scene for the hotel room reminded me a little bit of the visualization of how Peter Parker disrupted Doctor Strange's spell that eliminates the fact that everybody on the planet knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And from what we assume, although it's not proven just yet in the trailers, which could be misleading, that disruption is going to open up the multiverse and allow characters from the existing Sony films, directed by Sam Raimi and also Mark Webb, to come over into the MCU for at least one movie. We saw Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus. We know that there are rumors about Jamie Foxx's Electro and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin and Sandman and the Lizard and several other Spider-Man villains that could come over into the MCU for the point of No Way Home. And because I've seen that trailer so many times, the flash bang visualization of Peter interrupting that spell looked very similar to what happened to Eddie in that hotel room. Also because it's worded in a way that's specifically misleading, because Venom says to Eddie, like, I'm going to show you some of my power. But then as the room is transforming and they are being transported from the Sony universe over to the MCU, Venom is equally confused. Like, he makes it very clear that he's not the one doing this. And that the power that he was going to show Eddie that the symbiotes have was not the transformation.
What?
I, in the moment when I was watching that, thought that this is how Sony is going to explain how Venom is able to transport back and forth between the Sony universe and the MCU. That it would just be a power that the symbiotes had, and that they could say, like, he's an alien. You know, he has these abilities that we're not familiar with, but one of them is being able to jump from one multiverse to the other. But one of the reasons why I don't think that that's necessarily the case is because when Venom sees Tom Holland's Peter Parker, it's the Far From Home reveal, And obviously the spell that Doctor Strange is casting for Peter Parker is much later than the Far From Home reveal. So it would be weird for him to drop into the MCU at that time and see that happen. It raises a lot of questions about how this happened and specifically why he got dropped into that moment. And also it's very curious about why Venom would react to the sight of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Like, he does not have a connection to Spider-Man the way that he normally would in the comic books, where their origins are tied to each other. You know, I put a lot of thought into how he reacts to seeing Spider-Man. He just says that guy, and he could just be intrigued by who this person is. You could read it several different ways. It could be malevolent, it could be sinister, it could just be curiosity. But, you know, it's putting a pin in the fact that, like, hey, Venom recognizes who the Spider-Man guy is, and maybe these two should cross paths. But now, at the very least, we know that Venom is in the MCU for the time being, and where they go from there is anyone's guess, but I have a couple of theories that I want to get to next.
Why me?
So let's talk about why this is significant. Clearly, with Sony and Marvel agreeing to share Spider-Man back and forth, for the two movies, Homecoming and Far From Home, but then also letting him show up in Civil War and Infinity War and Endgame, that was part of an agreement that Sony would agree to share Spider-Man alone. However, at the same time, Sony was building this entire universe of characters that are connected to Spider-Man, and that started with Venom. We expect to get Morbius, played by Jared Leto, coming in his own movie down the line, and then there has been talk about a Kraven the Hunter film starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, and all of this is getting developed as a Sony universe. However, fans have been saying that they want to get to a point where on screen we're going to be able to see Venom and Spider-Man team up or fight against each other in some sort of fashion, and this is Sony taking a very big swing to move Venom over to the MCU.
I am a predator. I need to be free.
The other option would have been to pull Tom Holland out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies and drop him into the Sony sandbox, and that is a possibility, which is something we'll talk about a little bit further in this video, where down the line I think Tom Holland could be opposite Tom Hardy and Jared Leto and some of these other characters. We won't really know that until No Way Home happens, but little by little they've been building this cinematic universe, and I think it's going to grow even bigger with No Way Home. So let me explain to you why in our next segment.
Promise! I promise! Oh yeah!
The Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it now has grown to such an extent that bringing in an extraterrestrial like Venom isn't that far off the board and can be explained a little bit more easily than if you had brought him in, say, in like Marvel's Phase 1 or Phase 2. We now have existing organizations like SWORD, the Shield of Outer Space, essentially. You have characters like Captain Marvel and the Eternals, who have been around forever, that could bring knowledge of the symbiotes and the symbiote planet. The Guardians are out in the galaxies, obviously, exploring different places, and having them land on Venom's planet wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. There are far more ways to explain an alien symbiote that could be rolled into the MCU and make him part of the bigger thing. I, however, personally kind of think that they're going to go in the opposite direction. A lot of people have been saying bring Venom over to the MCU, but it really feels like Sony is ready to bring Tom Holland's Spider-Man back from Marvel after No Way Home and have him play in the films that they are building on their side. Sony was trying to build a universe, a cinematic universe from their Spider-Man characters, dating as far back as the Andrew Garfield films. Like at the time that they started rolling those out, they populated those films with several characters that could be developed into bigger characters down the line, whether it be Chris Cooper playing Norman Osborn, Paul Giamatti as the Rhino, Felicity Jones was one time cast as Felicia Hardy. Like, these are all characters that were supposed to pay off in films down the line, and they didn't happen. When Sony couldn't build the cinematic universe out of Spider-Man, they let the character go over to Marvel, and he got to play in the MCU. But at the same time, Sony kept building this other universe. They got Venom off the ground, and I mentioned Morbius and Kraven the Hunter and these other characters that they want to do. If No Way Home allows Sony to credibly bring back a lot of the Raimi characters and a lot of the Mark Webb characters, then by the end of No Way Home, a Tom Holland Spider-Man in the Sony Spider-Verse could have access to, at a bare minimum, Venom, Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Electro, Sandman, Shocker, Vulture. All of the Spider-Man characters are on the table, and they're all Sony properties. So it's like Marvel helped Sony indirectly to build up its universe, and now all it needs is a Spider-Man. And the end credit scene of Venom seems to say, we have a Spider-Man and he's played by Tom Holland. But if you think about a big picture, Marvel's getting to a place where they don't necessarily need Spider-Man as much as they did in Phase 3. Because they're introducing so many new heroes, whether it be Shang-Chi or the Eternals. They've talked about Blade. They have all these characters who are coming to the television shows. They have plenty of sequels coming for Thor and Captain Marvel and Black Panther. The Guardians of the Galaxy. They still need to do Fantastic Four and the X-Men. They could be doing projects for, the next 10 years without even having to come around and think about Spider-Man. So maybe it's time for Spider-Man to go back to the Sony Spider-Verse. I think this end credit scene was the first step in that direction. Or maybe I'm totally wrong. So why don't you head to the comments down below and let me know what you think about the impact of the scene, and also just what you thought when you got to see it for the very first time. Because I screamed. And I kind of even knew that it was coming. And I thought it was totally fantastic and unbelievable. I think it's an exciting new direction, not just for the Venom films and for Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but just for the Spider-Man universe at Sony in general. While you're here, do me a favor, go down and hit subscribe. Turn on your notifications. Every time we put a theory video like this or anything else that's entertainment based on the Cinema Blend YouTube page, you guys will be the very first ones to hear about it.